we've always had this robust debate over what this document means, which is really our founding document, or the document, moment of conception in a way, 1776. We go back to the Declaration, and all men are created equal. We argue about what human nature is, what men are, and we argue what does that mean, and we argue about what equality is. So obviously that leads to or plays a role in the Civil War, in the sense that the argument revolves around that. I feel like that is, and then we get into the last century, and we're sitting here now thinking about the 250th. How do you break down that debate now? What does that look like now? What does the argument over the Declaration look like now? Because that debate is perhaps happening without anyone mentioning the Declaration, unfortunately, but it does come up. It does come up explicitly, and you talk about it. But when you think about the kind of fight that would emerge, over the 250th, because what's going to happen, right, is inevitably the left is going to criticize whatever the Trump administration does, and they're going to say, well, actually, this isn't right. But how do you perceive that battle now between right and left over the Declaration?
That's a very good question, and there's certainly multiple dimensions that you could think about in answering a question like that. One of the most obvious would be the battle over the actual history, the teaching of American history, and especially the question of slavery, the question of race, all of those questions which got folded into the New York Times's so-called 1619 project. The point of that date being to try to replace 1776 in the popular history of the country, and to think of this not as a country of land of the free and home of the brave, but rather as the home of unfreedom, the home of slavery, beginning in 1619 when the first shipload of slaves arrived in Virginia to be sold, and that in a way what the New York Times wanted to do in the 1619 project was to reset American history to begin earlier with the arrival of slavery, not freedom, or European style freedom at least, in the Americas. And that's it's been extremely. I think there are at least two things that are interesting about this project. One is how unsuccessful it has been at gathering support from the most illustrious liberal historians of the country. This is a very liberal or radical political reading of American history, the 1619 Project, and yet, if you wanted to name a handful of sort of great American historians of the Revolutionary period, you would name people like Gordon Wood, maybe certainly the late ideological origins guy. What's his
Bernard
name?
Bailyn, yes.
Bernard Bailyn, the late Bud Bailyn. Sorry. A few people like that, none of whom endorsed the 1619 Project. Most of whom at least, criticized the 1619 Project in writing, in interviews, and in newspapers and other formats, and attracted a lot of attention to themselves, and showed in a way that civic education was not impossible in America. That is, that the left and the right could agree on some very important and fundamental things, such as that 1619 is not really the symbolic, much less the actual historical beginning of the United States of America, or of the ideas of the United States of America. And on that, there's really little controversy between Bernard Bailyn and Gordon Wood, and I could name a lot of other historians. I can look around my unkept office and find many books by them. and mention their names. But, with all of the controversy we have over race in America and over the Trump administration, politics in general, it's I find it surprising how easy it can be actually to get a pretty near consensus among good historians about what the fundamentals of the American story actually are, and they sound pretty old-fashioned, really, in comparison to the sort of constantly evolving newspeak of their opponents in the academy these days. So I think that's one very interesting thing. But of course, the other thing is that the 1619 Project, even though it hasn't been, I think, nearly as successful as the New York Times had hoped, still has, assumed a kind of curricular afterlife, which is amazing. It has been, despite its critical failing, it has been something like a commercial success, I think. And the educational materials of the 1619 Project you can find in your child's high school and maybe even in his or her grade school. They're all over the place. They've been bought widely by poor, misled superintendents of schools and school board members in districts all over the country, I'm afraid.
I mean, it is striking the opposition there. I mean, there's you are either centering, civic education around the principle of equality or political equality in some central way, or you're centering it around slavery, and saying, no, actually, the foundation and at the heart of this is slavery and oppression, or at the heart of this is this principle of political equality. But nonetheless, political equality is certainly something that is taken up by the left and proclaimed loudly, and we're ostensibly going to celebrate something about this, over the course of the next year. So that will be very interesting to see how it plays out and what sort of celebration this is, which certainly everyone wants to be a part of. On the right, everyone wants to influence for good reason. So let's talk about just the importance of that celebration. I think one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because I think that it's very easy for the intellectually minded and regular people alike these days to sort of discount pomp and circumstance and tradition and ritual, right? And the kind of celebrations that we're talking about. Americans like to laugh at themselves for commercializing holidays. It's a good American pastime. It's what we do. But it's the same as awards. Giving honors officially. These things have been eaten away from the inside, both because so many institutions are corrupt or not trusted, and because I think something about our education and culture nowadays sort of discounts them. But it strikes me that this is a really important thing to celebrate, and that somehow Trump has really latched onto this and understands that. And I don't know. I look to you to tell us why.
Yes. No. Well, the Garden of Heroes. I mean, he has all of these ideas for patriotic commemoration, and I wanted to remind your audience that one of the first major speeches that President Trump gave in his first term of office, in a joint session to Congress, his first address to a joint session of Congress, happened to spend a lot of its time talking about the coming 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Mm-hmm. This was very early in his first term. He didn't have to talk about the Declaration of Independence or the coming anniversary because it was not, at the top of anyone's to-do list. But in a rather far-seeing speech, which is not the usual kind of political give and take, but one could say this is one of his more statesman-like speeches. I think he really talked about the meaning of the 250th anniversary, the meaning of the Declaration of Independence for America and for the people whom we call Americans. And it was a good speech. It was a serious speech. I mean, it was a speech that, of course, got little attention at the time and less still since. I'm afraid to say, but
It was that
nonetheless,
good. It was that good.
it was that good. Yes, we could well go back to that speech actually, and make something out of it. Give some addresses about that speech, or some op-eds on that speech should be written. Because he's always had a good sort of patriotic, good eye and ear for patriotic themes and occasions. And even when he doesn't need to, for any sort of overt political purpose, appeal to these kinds of patriotic occasions and causes, he does. That is, he realizes that it's an important part of his job to speak to Americans about America, and without any. I don't think there's an ounce of cynicism in that. I think he's quite sincere in thinking that one of his most important jobs as president is to defend the country, explain the country to its own citizens, and to take back the country, as he understands it, from the elite, from the political aristocrats and oligarchs who, over the past 100 years or less, have absorbed almost every ounce of political power in the system, and have turned what was once a much more democratic political order into a much less democratic political order.
Now, why is that, right? I mean, here you have, it's so true. I mean, you see it. I don't think it's disputable that when you see him, there's not an ounce of cynicism. He immediately understands, like a garden of heroes. We're going to have big statues, heroes all over. He's constantly explaining America. He comes up with these ideas, or he latches onto these ideas to celebrate America. He from the get-go was talking about the 250th, and he's clearly very excited about it. And there's important people in the administration who are pushing this forward. This is a real initiative. It's not just sort of a song and dance. But why is he, Donald J. Trump, right, able to just sort of without thinking say and do those things and see that as part of his role, as opposed to let's say Barack Hussein Obama, as Trump likes to call him, likes to use that middle name. But what's the difference between the two?
That's a good question, and it's a long question, I think, because the short answer is education. I mean, the education that Obama had turns out to be really quite different from the education that Donald J. Trump had. I mean, both went to Ivy League institutions eventually. Trump was at UPenn, and the ex-president, of course, was at Columbia, and eventually at Harvard Law School as well. And there's something about the elite culture, which each president had, of course, an exposure to elite culture in America. If you define that sufficiently elastically to include two very different slices of elite culture. Donald Trump, I've written on this question. Donald Trump does, here's a word that is very important to Donald Trump, and he uses it frequently: deals. Not every Ivy League businessman or much less politician or lawyer thinks about the world in terms of deals. What is a deal? What's the difference between a deal and a mergers and acquisition, or any of the more sort of elaborate, structured public offerings of companies, or venture capital rounds, or any of the things you could read about in the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times happening in America, or in Europe for that matter, or in Asia. All around the world they happen these days. But the people who are at Davos, who go to Davos in order to feel nice, important about themselves in the world, they don't do deals. They do agreements and arrangements and world improving,
much fancier things,
philanthropic exercises of one kind or another. They're not in this for themselves. Oh no, has nothing to do with self-interest. This has nothing to do with getting ahead in the world, or making your mark on the world. This is all a kind of odd, selfless philanthropic project. Well, Donald Trump does not think like that. He thinks about deals. He can get you a great deal. He's got to get himself a great deal. He has no block to thinking about self-interest, about what's in it for him, what's in it for you, what should be in it for you and him, and how you're going to get together, to come to an agreement in which each of your self-interests is to some degree satisfied without necessarily getting everything.
Some people,
one of you want.
Some people would say, okay, well, the downside of that is, well, he's no block. Well, he's without shame. But the other side of that is that he's just simply honest. Right. The positive side of that, he's being honest. He's not using these ridiculous subterfuges to pretend to himself and other people that he's not actually at the end of the day making a deal.
Yes. No. That's all. That's very true and very important. I think he doesn't. If I could be a professor for a second, Trump is kind of the. I was thinking about this the other day. Trump is kind of the antithesis of the categorical ethics of Immanuel Kant. High German ethics in which any reference to self-interest or even happiness is anti-ethical. It's defined as the opposite of thinking ethically, which when you're thinking ethically, you can think only about universal laws and willing universal laws and acting for the sake of sort of universal consistency and goodness, and it has nothing to do with getting ahead in the world. It has nothing to do with even happiness or improving the quality of life in sort of material or objective ways, and for 200 years, the hottest thing in ethics has been this kind of thinking, which begins by putting aside all self-interest, all thought of your own happiness or of anybody else's happiness, and looking to universalize moral duties. Doing the right thing for the right reason, which is the only ethically pure and satisfactory reason to do anything.
And this is would you say that this is what you're describing as sort of the skeleton behind a lot of the ridiculous morality, the preening, the virtue signaling we see, as you said,
yes. among
that elite? I do this completely for everybody else, and you must sacrifice yourself to this universal abstract thing.
Yes, it's like United Nations thinking. Mm-hmm. If it were possible to take the United Nations seriously, it would have been taken seriously already by professors, and has they've tried to take it seriously for more than 75 years now, and they still haven't succeeded.
And Trump doesn't take it seriously.
Ridiculous about it. but the way of to think that everyone has a country, and thus some national interest, and you're partial to your own. That's the beginning point of common sense in politics. It is absolutely outside of thinking like a United Nations person. Mm-hmm. You have no country. You have no interest. You are here for the sake of the world. You're here for the sake of peoples everywhere. And you are here to empower them, to give them the kind of expertise and the kind of selfless morality which they themselves are much too engulfed in capitalist acts to be capable of.
Right.
And so, and the whole, from a certain point of view, Trump is the anti-UN. He's the opposite of pure morality in the sort of highfalutin sense of German idealism. And he is a much more American figure, or a much more democratic figure, if I may say so, with small d, of course. He doesn't expect people to be purely moral. He doesn't expect them to do good for no reason, that touches their own well-being or their families or their country's well-being. He lives in many ways in a very different world from the ruling class, in international politics, or even in, increasingly at the national level in country after country, which they all sort of think now in a kind of UN approved way, or they try to. And Trump is not like that, and he's not guilty because he doesn't think like everyone else does. And so what he says, which to many people comes across as sort of common sense, or just, this is the way the world is. I mean, take it or leave it, but you're not going to change it. That is the way most people think about him, and I think the way he thinks about himself, but it's not the way that the elite thinks about him, or, of course, that he thinks about the elites. I mean, he thinks the elites are, to use another favorite word in his vocabulary, idiots.
Yes, and they think he is immoral. It always strikes me the morality, that the moral language that comes out from those who can't stand Trump is actually astounding. Like, a lot of times you're listening to people who in other contexts would say there are no standards, there's no real such thing as virtue and vice. And then Donald Trump comes up, and they sound like a Puritan preacher, from a couple hundred years ago, and they found their moral courage all of a sudden, because the important thing about denigrating Trump, and you kind of just gave us the cause of perhaps why they think that way, is to say that he is evil, he's immoral, he's in fact a bad person. But we have a few minutes left here, and there's so much we could continue along these lines. But maybe we will at the Lincoln Fellowship coming up in a few days. Be there.
Yes,
maybe we'll cross
see you
paths
soon. I hope.
But we have a few minutes left, and I do have to ask, the final question, and get into this, which is, what the heck do you think should be done for the 250th anniversary? What sorts of things do you want to see? What do you think? What do you think should happen? What are you hoping for?
That's a good question. I probably don't have a very good answer. At least I don't have an elaborate answer, because I think the truth is that we have. I wouldn't say we missed the boat, but we should have started earlier. Mm-hmm. If we are going to have any real, one of the glories of the bicentennial. I'm talking about either in 1976, which is the bicentennial of the Declaration, or in 1987, which was the bicentennial of the Constitution. Mm-hmm. So there are two bicentennials, but sort of the same group of holidays.
And for those who don't remember or weren't born then, these were very big deals. I mean, a lot came out of them.
Yes,
you were familiar if you were alive at either time.
They had everything from essay contests to movies made to celebrate them. They had tall ships sailing through New York Harbor. They had, a sort of historic trains running across the country, thousands of miles, carrying, copies of the Gettysburg Address and all sorts of American historical wonders to so that people in the country in small towns could see these things and learn something about American history and participate in the joy of the celebration of its bicentennial. There were many programs, and all of them were really pretty good, I think. And certainly in terms of scholarship, a lot of money was devoted to sponsoring new scholarship in the 1970s and in the 1980s. It was a sort of a 20-year period, more or less, of real scholarly innovation and productivity in American history, in writings about the Constitution and the Civil War and all of the wonderful episodes of our history. And I think we only a fraction of the amount has been signed up and has been started today that at a comparable period in the 1970s and 1980s had been undertaken already at this point as the bicentennial was approaching. So we've sort of, we have, I wish we had done more. It's not too late, but it's getting a little tough to have large scale or long-term projects. But still, there's a great deal that should be done. And I think the to-do list would include everything you can to tell the story of America and the American people to ourselves and our children and our children's children, and to remind ourselves what it is we are doing as American citizens and what we should be doing as American citizens. And that's it's never too late for that. And I think the administration is going to have some excellent programs, some more scholarly, some more popular, as it should. This is, after all, not an occasion just for scholars or for scholarship. It's for everyone who loves history and loves America. And that means mostly citizens, ordinary citizens. And so those kinds of things, there will be, I saw just the other day, there will be high school essay contests all around America
this is good.
Feed into a kind of national contest over American civics. And that sounds interesting. And, it's going to require a lot of judges, Matt. So I'm hoping you're volunteering your time.
I think I might bow out of that one. That's what you get paid to do as a professor, is read those papers, right? Or you're supposed to read them. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today, but this was an excellent conversation. I thank you for it. And let us hope that some great things, maybe some great projects, can at least be started this next year in celebration of America's birthday. Thank you, Charles.
Terrific. Great to see you. Happy 4th of July. It's too late for that now, but it'll come around next year, we hope.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll see you at the Lincoln Fellowship, the Claremont Institute.
All right,
event.
great.
Thank you.
Take care.